video has the potential to change everything you're currently doing with language learning. English is not my first language. I didn't live or even visit an English-speaking country until I was 18. I still have an accent and still make mistakes all the time, but I would consider myself pretty fluent in English, which allowed me to earn an Ivy League degree using English and run this educational YouTube channel entirely in English. I used to hate learning English, and after a lot of trial and error, in this video I did a deep analysis of my 18 years of experience in learning English, everything I learned about how to become fluent in English, and science-based strategies on language learning from this book. At the end of the video, I will share my study plan of how I would study English if I could learn English from the start, so make sure to watch until the end. Now let's get straight into it. So when I was in high school, I was terrified of English classes because our English teacher would randomly call on people to read things. I specifically remember one day when my teacher called me and another classmate to stand in front of the whole class and have a conversation in English on the spot. I was so embarrassed because my partner, who spoke remarkable English, kept asking me questions that I had no idea how to answer. So I just stood there wishing I could hide under the table. Because English tests in China focused on reading and writing with a little bit listening, there's no speaking component. So I read all the textbook and memorized all the required vocabularies and grammars. My grades were pretty decent in like middle school and high school, but I wouldn't consider myself anywhere near to the level of speaking fluent English. So in language learning, there's input and there's output. Input is the learner is exposed to the new language, such as like reading or listening, while output is using that language to speak or write. Canadian applied linguistic Meryl Swan points out that the importance of learning of output could be that output pushes learner to process language more deeply with more mental effort than does input, because it's actually harder for people to say something than to understand what someone else is saying. You might be able to figure out what someone means, or even you don't understand every word they use, you can still kind of guess, but output, you cannot do that. You have to actually think and have a deeper understanding of what you just said. So because in high school, all I did was input and almost zero output practicing, my English was just not good, and basically I can't speak English at all. So you may think, oh, then I should just practicing speaking and writing more then, huh? It's actually not that easy. So after I came to the US in the first year, I still spoke basically zero English. I hang out with my Chinese friends most of the time. I did have a roommate who was American, but I really couldn't speak to her because I just didn't understand her, and I was so scared to speak English. I would try to translate everything in my head, but I couldn't put together a full sentence. I would just use each individual words, and it was just not enough even for like the easiest conversation. And for all the class presentations, I would write everything down and memorize word by word. So even though I was in an English environment, my spoken English showed very minimal improvement. And that year I was so isolated and very desperate. I was so mad at myself at the time. I blamed myself for not trying harder and not using the environment enough to improve my spoken English. It wasn't until now that I learned about the concept of the silent period. Applied linguist Stephen Crunchen gave the example of a 4-year-old girl who was his neighbor and had just arrived in the US speaking their English. So he would teach this little girl simple English words like hi or ball, but the girl would just remain silent no matter how hard he tried. So eventually, after 5 months, this little girl finally started to speak a little bit of English. Language learners usually go through a silence period during which they are basically don't want to do any output. They don't want to speak anything, and during this silence period, they are just simply acquiring input. Don't beat yourself up if you are having a hard time speaking English. This is like completely normal. So because I have lived in an English-speaking country for so long, I almost forgot the challenges and the excitement of learning a foreign language for the first time. I have actually started learning Spanish recently, which is a brand new language for me. Hola.
Me llamo Han, yo soy de Beijing, China. Vivo y trabajo en Texas, in los Estados Unidos. I learned a bunch of new vocabulary words like país, gato, y China. Lingoda offers classes in English, Spanish, German, French. I really wish I had known about Lingoda when I was actively learning English back in the day, because Lingoda has this super cool 2-month sprint. If you successfully attend 30 classes during the sprint or 60 classes during the super sprint, then you can get 50% of cash back, or you can actually choose to get 100% of your class credits back so you can continue learning. It's just such a good way to keep yourself accountable and have the motivation to show up to every single class. I love that Lingoda has all the class materials in Spanish. Each class only has 3 to 5 students, so everybody has plenty of opportunities to speak. I am currently doing a sprint with Lingoda for Spanish this summer, and I'm just having so much fun and lots of motivation just to want to keep learning and taking classes. If you're ready for a challenge that will fast track your language skills, join Lingoda Sprint, use my code HANJUNGLE, then you'll get a $25 discount for your deposit. So thank you so much Lingoda for sponsoring this video.
In the second year after I went to US, a new Chinese student became a friend of mine, Aaron, who spoke worse English than me at the time. No bad meaning here, because Aaron had a slightly stronger accent and he used fewer big words, but he absolutely excelled at making friends everywhere he went. He would just introduce himself with confidence, even if sometimes his English wasn't good enough to describe what he meant in like a full sentence. He would just use hand gestures and sound effect to express what he meant. And that basically just blew my mind. And maybe it's because he's more of an extrovert than I am, but Aaron was a huge inspiration to me. He was not self-conscious. He was just out there having fun and making friends. So shout out to Aaron if you're watching this video. By the way, his English is very good now. That made me realize language is really just a bridge to different people. I gradually started to talk to more people at the time, and guess what? People didn't mind my broken-ass English. Most of them thought it was really cool that I could speak 2 languages. In this article, it actually shows that first language acquisition is the quickest and the most successful instance of language. This means that the most effective way of learning a language is basically how like a little baby learned how to speak their native language. So what's the difference between first language acquisition and foreign language acquisition? Our first languages are usually taught by our caretakers, like parents or grandparents, and caretaker communication is largely message-focused and not form-focused. In other words, much of the caretaker's effort is put into getting the message across, into being understood, and not dwelling on the nuts and bolts of the language. For example, if a 3-year-old say, "Mom, I eat," and pointing at a cake, most people will get the message that the kid probably wants to eat the cake, even the kid is not speaking proper grammar and in full sentences. While foreign language learning experience is usually quite the opposite, which focuses on grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, etc. So the fastest way of learning and practicing a new language should be message focused instead, and not should be form focused. Like the moment I start doing what Aaron was doing, as long as I can get my message delivered, I use hand gestures, sound effects, whatever I need. For example, I would point in the mirror and say, "I want this," and the other person would usually say something like, "Oh, you want this mirror? Cool." Then I would immediately learn the word mirror in like a real life context. There was this joke, a person visiting an English speaking country and stayed in a hotel and called the front desk, say, "Do you know Tom and Jerry? Jerry is in my room." This is an excellent example of you don't know the word, but the message is well delivered. In Johnson's book, there is an example about a made-up language called Flipspark. Here, I would actually use a simpler example that I created. So I made up this language called Hunglish. Let's say I speak to 3 of my friends in Hunglish. So friend A doesn't know any Hunglish and is completely confused. So A just smiles and stands there. And friend B knows a little bit of Hunglish. So this is what he actually hears and understands. So even though he knows some Hunglish, he still doesn't understand the meaning of the sentence. So there's still just confusion. And friend C C knows more Hangul and this is what he actually hears. Can you boha me the pen? So C, even though he doesn't understand the word boha, C can roughly work out the meaning of this sentence. Boha is probably a verb, something like bring or give. So this example shows how language just a little bit beyond our current level of competence can often be worked out by the learner. Russian's claim is that acquisition will occur when unknown items are only just beyond the learner's present level. So we should always keep that in mind. Because I had the courage to talk and meet more people, I started to meet some friends who were actually vibe with me and were willing to take longer time to explain things to me and listen to me take 5 times longer to say something. Also, I started to obsess over American TV shows. I watched 12 seasons of The Big Bang Theory, 11 seasons of The Modern Family, 10 seasons of Friends, and 6 seasons of Brooklyn Nine-Nine multiple times in just 2 years. By the end of that year, my English had become pretty fluent, allowing me to talk to whoever I wanted and present an argument easily. I was so excited to finally had my first dream in English, which was a big milestone showing that my brain could finally fully function in English. So here is how I would study English if I can learn English from the start. First, I would start by watching English language TV shows with Chinese subtitles. For you, you can just add subtitles in your first language. Actually, if there also has English subtitles, that will be the best. You can also watch YouTube videos, movies, or whatever you like the most. Just watch a lot of shows and immerse yourself in the English-speaking environment. This is purely for entertainment. Do not try hard to study. The key here is to truly enjoy it so it doesn't feel like studying. The amount of time you spend listening is what really matters. 2, I would found some kids shows or books for English-speaking children. The difference is that if the book is for a second language learners, it will translate everything into your language. So you will still thinking in your own language. But if the book or show is for English-speaking kids, they will use small words, pictures, or music to show what the word means. This encourages you to think directly in English. So when you see the word flower, instead of thinking of hua, which is the Chinese word for flower, you will think about a picture of a flower and the smell of a flower. So start with materials for like 3 or 4 years old. Once it becomes too easy, upgrade to material 6 or 7 years old. Native English-speaking children usually learn to control all the structures like grammars of the language by the age of about 8. 3, if you have access to an English-speaking person, that would be the best. Just talk to them and don't be shy about not speaking perfect English. Focus on getting your message across, as we mentioned. But I understand that for many of you, this might be a little bit hard. If that's the case, talking English to a camera, like a digital diary. Every day, speak to the camera and say whatever is on your mind. This is just for yourself, and after a while, if you watch it back, you will be surprised how much you have improved. Good luck, everybody, with your English learning journey. I truly wish you the best. Check out Linguda. Use my link in the description box if you think Linguda might be benefit to you. For lots of you guys who want to see Nunu, I'm going to grab her. She doesn't like to be home. She likes to be free and play. See? Okay. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye. Have a wonderful day.